The Galactic Council chamber loomed vast and imposing, a circular expanse of polished obsidian and shimmering light. Thousands of delegates from hundreds of species filled their designated seats, their holographic emblems glowing faintly above them. The air hummed with the tension of a decision centuries in the making. At the chamber's center, Supreme Chancellor Verlin rose from his ornate floating throne, his elongated, insectoid form shifting as he addressed the assembly. His voice, modulated to be understood across species, echoed through the chamber. "The time for debate has ended," Verlin declared, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "For too long, humanity has disregarded the order of this galaxy. They expand unchecked, ignore interstellar regulations, and disrupt economies with reckless technological advancements. They flaunt their autonomy, refusing to integrate into our great coalition. We have tried diplomacy. We have tried sanctions. They do not listen. So, let me make it clear. This council stands at a crossroads. Either we act now, or we allow these unpredictable creatures to dictate the future." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some species, like the warlike Zelther, rumbled their approval, their scaled bodies bristling with anticipation. Others, like the pragmatic Yelsari, remained silent, calculating the potential risks. A deep, resonant voice cut through the tension. "And what is your proposed course of action, Supreme Chancellor?" The speaker, High Strategist Orm Varric of the Vishari Dominion, leaned forward, his feline features unreadable. His people had warred with humanity before. It had not gone well. Verlin lifted a delicate hand. A holographic projection filled the chamber, displaying a vast fleet of council warships amassed at the edge of the Sol system. "We begin with a show of force, a swift, decisive strike on one of their outer colonies. A warning. Once they realize the council will not tolerate their defiance, they will bend." Across the chamber, representatives exchanged glances. Some nodded, emboldened by the sight of their combined fleets. Others hesitated. Finally, after a moment of weighted silence, the vote commenced. One by one, species aligned themselves. When the final tally appeared above the chamber, an overwhelming majority in favor, Verlin allowed himself a rare expression of satisfaction. "Then it is decided," he announced. "The war to contain humanity has begun." Far from the grand halls of interstellar politics, on Earth, the news arrived in the least dramatic fashion possible, buried between economic reports and updates on a new Mars-based entertainment complex. Inside the Defense Oversight Center in Geneva, Admiral Evelyn Carter sipped her coffee as the official transmission scrolled across the holodisplay before her. Around her, analysts and AI advisors parsed the data with cold efficiency. "Galactic Council formally declares war," her adjutant read aloud. "First fleet movement detected near the Kepler-186 system. Estimated force: 5 dreadnoughts, 24 cruisers, assorted support craft." Carter exhaled slowly. "Jesus, took them long enough." The room remained largely unfazed. Decades ago, such an announcement might have sent military officials into a frenzy. Now it barely warranted a reaction. A junior officer, barely in his 20s, frowned. "Should we, do something?" Carter chuckled, leaning back in her chair. "Son, we already did. You think we built all these automated defense grids and planetary shields for fun?" She gestured at the strategic overview on the display. The approaching fleet was a collection of blinking red markers. Near them, the silent blue icons of Earth's orbital defense systems sat motionless, waiting. "Let them come," she said. On the fringes of human-occupied space, the Council fleet emerged from hyperspace, its warships gleaming under the light of a distant star. The lead dreadnought, Judicator, powered forward, its weapons primed to fire on the colony world below. Commander Threx of the Zelther Confederacy, overseeing the operation, snarled in anticipation. "Human response?" he demanded. The tactical officer hesitated. "None, sir. No mobilization detected. Their planetary defenses remain inactive." Threx bared his fangs. "Fools. They don't believe we'll strike." He turned toward the main display, issuing the final command. Begin bombardment. The first salvo of plasma lances streaked toward the planet. Before they reached the atmosphere, they vanished. A shimmering barrier flared to life, absorbing the energy without effort. The fleet hesitated. Then, without warning, space itself responded. A single pulse of light erupted from the system's orbital defense array. The Judicator ceased to exist. No explosion. No wreckage. One moment it was there. The next, gone. Panic seized the fleet. Automated defense platforms, unnoticed and unbothered for decades, activated in perfect synchronization. The second dreadnought followed the first. Then a cruiser. Then another. Within minutes, the entire attacking force had been reduced to debris. The colony remained untouched. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over before a single human had been roused from their daily routine. On Earth, the event warranted a brief news update. A reporter, barely concealing her boredom, read from the prompter. In other news, a Galactic Council fleet attempted an assault on Kepler 186f earlier today. The attack was repelled by standard orbital defenses. No casualties reported. Defense systems estimate a 99.76% efficiency rate in neutralizing hostiles. And now, for sports. Across the human networks, the war was little more than an afterthought. On social media, memes flourished, mocking the Council's arrogance. Defense analysts casually compared the event to a minor traffic violation. In the halls of the Galactic Council, however, the reaction was far more severe. A stunned silence filled the chamber as reports trickled in. The assembled representatives stared in horror at the casualty numbers. Not a single human vessel had moved. No soldiers had deployed. No counterattack had been launched. Humanity had not even acknowledged their declaration of war. Chancellor Verlin, usually composed, struggled to maintain his demeanor. This is impossible, he murmured. They must have deployed some unknown superweapon. Strategist Varric, his expression unreadable, merely shook his head. No, Chancellor. They simply did not care enough to fight. For the first time in the Council's long history, the war they had declared had already begun to feel like a mistake. The Galactic Council chamber, once a beacon of authority, now crackled with barely restrained chaos. Representatives bickered across the Grand Hall, their voices clashing in overlapping bursts of disbelief, fury, and desperation. The battle at Kepler 186f, if it could even be called that, had shattered more than a fleet. It had shattered the illusion that humanity could be controlled. Chancellor Verlin sat rigid on his elevated throne, his mandibles twitching as he struggled to maintain order. Enough, he snapped, his amplified voice cutting through the din. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. This was not a defeat, he continued, though the lie felt bitter on his tongue. This was an unfortunate miscalculation. Our forces were unprepared for the level of automated defense employed by the humans. But that does not mean we are powerless. A guttural hiss came from the Zelther envoy. We were wiped out before we even fired a second shot. If that is not a defeat, Chancellor, what do you call it? An oversight, Verlin said sharply. And one we will correct. From the shadows of the chamber, a low voice cut in. No, you won't. High Strategist Orm Varric stood, his feline eyes gleaming with cold amusement. You speak as if we have options, as if humanity is engaged in this war. They are not. That is the problem. We declared war on them, and they do not care enough to participate. A ripple of discomfort spread through the chamber. Verlin's exoskeletal fingers drummed against the arm of his throne. We will make them care, he said finally. The assembled delegates exchanged uncertain glances. Far across the void, humanity remained as indifferent as ever. On Luna, a boardroom bathed in neon glow played host to a different kind of war council. One fought not with fleets, but with financial projections. Sales are up 13%, Adrian Velasquez announced, tapping the hollow table. Defense stocks are surging. We've got a dozen minor colonies requesting upgraded orbital platforms. And, he added with a smirk, Our contract with the Yelsari just expanded to include full-spectrum fleet support. Around the table, executives of MarsTech and Luna Dynamics exchanged pleased nods. Evelyn Carter, retired admiral turned corporate consultant, swirled her drink idly. So let me get this straight, she mused. They declare war on us, we don't engage, and now they're buying weapons from us? Essentially, Velasquez said. Some of the smaller council species aren't thrilled about how this is going. They're realizing that working with us is more profitable than fighting us. Carter chuckled. War as a business model. Not bad. Not just business, another executive added. This is control. Humanity doesn't need to conquer the council. We're making them dependent on us. Soon, they won't be able to afford hostility. Across the boardroom, approving murmurs rose. The war effort, if it could even be called that, wasn't being fought in space, but in contracts, supply lines, and technology exchanges. And humanity was winning. Back in the council's war chamber, frustration boiled over. Chancellor Verlin watched as yet another report confirmed their dwindling war support. It had been mere weeks since the first strike, and already key allies were wavering. They're bleeding us without ever firing a shot, a minister muttered. Verlin turned sharply. Then we will force their hand. We will strike at their core worlds. If they will not come to war, we will bring war to them. The chamber murmured in uneasy agreement. Humanity's apathy was its greatest weapon, but surely, if their homeworld was threatened, they would have no choice but to act. The attack force assembled in secret, bypassing border skirmishes and minor colonies. The target, Earth itself. A decisive blow to force humanity into engagement. As the Council fleet approached Sol, their sensors stretched outward, scanning for signs of resistance. What they found was nothing. No fleets moved to intercept them. No distress calls sounded. The planet below continued its daily rhythm, oblivious. The Council ships held formation, waiting for the inevitable human response. Then, without warning, the first ship vanished. There was no explosion, no weapon fire, just an absence where a vessel had been. Panic rippled through the fleet. Seconds later, another ship blinked out. Then another. Inside the command dreadnought, alarms shrieked. Admiral Kareth bellowed for answers, his claws digging into the armrest of his command throne. What is happening? The tactical officer's voice was raw with disbelief. Sir, we're being erased. The system's defenses are reacting, but we cannot detect the source. On Earth, deep within an underground defense hub, an AI construct processed the incursion. To the machine, this was not war. It was pest control. A silent protocol engaged, and one by one, the invading ships ceased to exist. Back aboard the Council dreadnought, Admiral Kareth's scales paled as he realized the truth. They planned for this. They always knew. The last thing he saw was an empty starfield where his fleet had once been. Back in the Council chamber, the silence was absolute. Verlin stared at the final report. His war was over. Not with a battle, not with a surrender, but with a quiet, indifferent erasure. For the first time in his long life, the Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Council felt something entirely new. Fear. The halls of the Galactic Council stood eerily silent. Not the silence of deliberation, nor the quiet of contemplation. This was something else. Something deeper. A silence born of helplessness. Chancellor Verlin sat motionless at the head of the chamber. His usually vibrant exoskeleton dulled, his antennae barely twitching. Around him, representatives sat in grim resignation, eyes locked on the glowing projection above. The official casualty report was still populating, but the numbers had lost meaning. 5 fleets, tens of thousands of vessels, millions of personnel, gone. No distress signals. No battle records, just gone. High Strategist Varric broke the silence, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. It is over. No one argued. Even the most warlike species, the ones who had clamored for humanity's submission, sat hollow-eyed, their earlier bravado reduced to whispers of disbelief. Verlin spoke at last, though his voice felt like it belonged to someone else. They never even responded. That was the part that made it unbearable. No human fleets had mobilized. No grand counteroffensive had been launched. Humanity had simply removed the problem, as if swatting away an insect too insignificant to warrant true attention. And now here they sat, the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy, leaders of species that had conquered empires, extinguished civilizations, rewritten history itself, and they had been dismissed with all the weight of a passing breeze. The doors to the chamber slid open, and all eyes turned as a lone figure strode inside. She was human. Evelyn Carter moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who had already won. She was dressed simply, not in the military garb of her past, but in the crisp, understated attire of a corporate representative. Her presence here was not as a general, not as a warrior, but as something infinitely more dangerous. An equal. The silence stretched as she reached the center of the chamber. She did not bow, did not acknowledge their authority. She simply stood there, expression calm, waiting. Verbin. Carter's tone remained even. Humanity does not seek dominion over this galaxy. We do not need to. You are already dependent on us. Our technology, our infrastructure, our economic influence. It binds your civilizations tighter than any fleet ever could. And that is why we will not allow this kind of disruption again. Varric exhaled slowly. And what do you propose? Carter met his gaze without hesitation. A restructuring. The chamber stirred. Even in the face of devastation, they understood what that meant. You will retain your titles, Carter continued. Your governments. Your culture. But the Galactic Council will no longer operate as a force opposed to humanity. Trade agreements will be rewritten. Military actions will require oversight. And, she added, her expression turning cold, if another act of aggression is made against humanity, there will not be another conversation. There will not be negotiations. There will simply be nothing left. Verlin knew in that moment that she was telling the truth. He looked around the chamber, at the once proud leaders of galactic civilizations, and saw no fight left in them. Finally, with the last remnants of his authority, Verlin straightened. Then let this be our final vote. The decision was unanimous. Carter nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. Without another word, she turned and walked back toward the chamber doors. Before she stepped through, she paused. One last thing, she said, glancing over her shoulder. The war you started? It never really began. But now, a faint smile touched her lips. Now it's over. And with that, she was gone.